Today we're going to learn about patterns using blocks, but first we're going to go over what patterns are. So a pattern is something that is reoccurring or repeating, and it keeps repeating itself. So for instance, like songs have rhythm, so they have a pattern to them. Or let's say, there's a lot of patterns that can go on. Like the walls in your sister's room, they're striped, so that's a pattern. It's another pattern. I'll show you right here. So they're striped, so that's another pattern. And what's a pattern that you can see in here?
Oh, Layla's blanket.
Yeah. So what's the pattern on the blanket? Well, you can just say it's like the blocks. You don't have to like really describe.
Green, pink, and
owls.
Owls. Yeah.
Yeah. Good job. Okay. So now I want you to get your blocks and make a pattern yourself. Okay, well, we pre-did the pattern making. Yeah. He did it earlier. We did pictures and then we did the video. Okay, so what's your pattern?
Yellow, red.
Yellow, red, yellow, red. Okay,
yellow and red.
So I would ask the class to make their own pattern, just like he did. And then I would try to make my own pattern. So, move your blocks out of the way. Thank you. Okay, so grab my pattern that I made. Thank you. Okay, we'll put it in here. Okay, so this is the pattern that I made for the kids for the class. So I'd ask the class then what they noticed about the pattern, and I'd ask them as a class as a whole to raise hands and kind of go over it. So this would be the first, the second, and the third. So I would ask, for instance, how many blocks total. It doesn't matter how big or small they are. I just wanted them to notice the difference sort of how they're going up. So the first one is, and also colors don't matter. I would probably get different colored blocks, but this is all I had at my house. So, what's the first block? What do you notice about the first block?
That it has 2 blocks in it.
Okay, perfect. And then what do you notice about the second one?
That this one has 4 blocks in it.
Okay, and then how many does this have?
6 blocks in it.
Okay. So how many does it go up on the bottom each time? 1. Yeah, you're right, by 1. So it goes 1. And how many does it go up by on the top each time?
By 1s.
Yeah, okay, so it goes up by 1. So we're adding 1 plus 1 each time on the top.
Both the same.
Yeah, good job. So I'd ask how they notice the pattern, how many blocks, what's the difference on the bottom and the top, and go over that with them. And then I'd ask them to get out their whiteboards and pens, which they should already have on their desk with them. I'd have them out with the blocks at the beginning of the lesson. And then I would show them on the whiteboard the pattern. So the first block is 1 plus 1 equals 2, which is the first block. And then I'd go over the second block is 2 plus 2 equals 4, which is that one. And then I'd go over the third block, which is 3 plus 3 equals 6, which is that one. So the total number of blocks. And then I'd ask them on their whiteboards, I'd write this on the board as well, blank plus blank equals blank, blank plus blank equals blank. So they would need to figure out the 4th and the 5th block. And they can use their blocks in order to find the amount of numbers if they want to. So, and I'd also ask them to build the 4th one. So you can take apart those and build what the 4th one would look like.
The 4th one?
Yeah. So if you're adding 1, what would be the next one in this pattern? So here, you can just take apart these 2 because you don't have enough. So
do we have to do on 4 like on this?
Yeah, well, do what you think is the 4th one. You got to build it yourself. You got to show me. You can use that one too. Thank you. All right. Okay. So, okay, perfect. So hold it up. So that's what the 4th one should look like. So how many blocks are on the top?
4.
And how many blocks are on the bottom?
4.
Okay, good job. So how many blocks is there total?
8.
Okay, so write it on your, this is going to be your whiteboard, even though it's mine we're sharing.
Like,
yeah, so
4 plus 4 equals 8.
Okay, yeah. So then, then what would the 5th one be? You do the next one as well.
4 equals 8.
So then what do you think the next one in the pattern would be? If you look at the pattern. And you can use blocks if you need to figure it out.
Wait, like 5?
If that's what you think it is, yeah. You're supposed to figure out the pattern. Good job. Okay, so then what is it going to be?
5 plus 5 equals 8. I mean, not 8, 10.
Yeah, good job.
I got carried away.
You're looking at that one. It's okay. Okay, so good job. So then after that, I'd kind of explain to them, or I would explain to them, how there's a pattern. So it goes up 1 each time, so that is the pattern in order to get the answer. So then I would turn this pattern and show them this pattern, and then go into sequences. And they could still have their blocks out and use their blocks in order to find the sequences. So the first sequence I would put on the board, for instance, would be 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So that's a sequence that is pretty simple, and I think that they would understand at this age because they are learning multiplication already. At least in my son's school, they started learning it last year in 3rd grade. And he tells me that he already does some sequences in his online homework that he has. So I would want to ask him then. He can use his blocks. There's a lot of blocks if he wants to. You don't have to use them right now, just so we can get the video done. Oh. But in order to find the 2, so I'd have the kids write this on the whiteboard. I'd copy it on the board and have them copy it on their whiteboard of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 with a block. And then they need to figure out what is added each time in order to get the answer. So they can either use skip counting or use subtracting in order to find their answer. So I'm going to let him do the next 3. And each time, after each one, I'd go over it with the class and get the answer and how we got it and different ways to get it. I think it's important to not just find the one way to get it. There's always usually more than one way. So we can skip count for this one, or we can also do the second minus the first to get the difference and double check it and make sure in order to get the final answer. So that's something that I think is important for finding these sequences, to show kids more than one way and the students more than one way to get the answer. So I'm going to go ahead and let him do these in order to get the answer. So do the first 2. So answer, yeah, and then you have to write like what you added. Right here? Yeah, what you added each time in order to get it.
So basically you just put these 2 in the
answers. Well, the answer goes here for that one. So do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So then write the answer for the next one, for what would be the next number. Okay, and then what did you add each time in order to get this? What did you add from 10 to 12 to get the answer?
2.
Okay, yeah, so then you write 2 there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so then do the next one.
15.
Yep.
3.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so the next one's a little more difficult, and I made it a little more difficult on purpose. You can't really skip count. I didn't start with the original number. This was to kind of progress, and after we did a few, I'd go over it with the class on how we would get this answer. So the first one is 2, and the second one is 7, and then 12, and then 17. So we're not really skip counting anymore. It's not really just going to be kind of like trying to think of it off the top of your head.
Everything is just with 7 and like 12.
Well, no. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the second number from the first number. So 7 minus 2 equals what?
5.
Okay, yeah. So then we're going to go to the next 2 numbers. So we're going to subtract the next 2. 12. What's 12 minus 7?
5.
Okay, 5. Sorry, 5 in the box. And then what's 17 minus 12?
5.
Okay. So what are you going to add each time to get the answer? So you're going to kind of do different this time. Instead of doing this first, we're doing this first. So what are you adding each time? What's in the boxes?
5.
Okay, so write 5.
And I just put 5 in there.
No. So you're going to add 5 to the last number in order to get the answer.
So 17 plus 5?
Yep. You can do it down at the bottom if you need to, or use your fingers. It's up to you.
22.
Good job. So this is an example of when it'd be also good to use blocks as well, because you could have 17 blocks and add 5 more in order to get the answer. The blocks can come in handy. He's really good at visual learning, so him taking apart and doing the blocks can help him see things better. I think every kid learns different though, but for him, that helps him learn. We've had to use tools like this in order to get him to understand his multiplication and facts at home and at school. And so I feel like introducing kids with something that they can see and touch and have hands-on is really important when learning this. So this would be a little bit more into it, getting this difficult, but kind of wanted to go over what we would do in order to get into a little bit more difficult sequences than the easier ones. And I'd want to go over, when we did this too, the 4 minus 2. And then the homework assignment after this. So after each time that kids would write it on their whiteboard and we go over it and do it together, I want the kids, I would go around and check them individually as well, because I want to make sure kids are understanding it on their own and not just getting lost in the classroom setting, which can happen. And that happened to him a lot in school, and he got behind. So I think it's really important that the kids know what they're doing and not just answering as a class and kind of getting by, that they really understand it themselves. So once I knew the kids were understanding it on their own, I would go over it with them as a class. The last thing is that I'd want them to notice patterns, not just in math, but around them, kind of like the quilt or music or something like that. So for their homework that day, I'd want them to go home, and on top of practicing sequences, I'd want them to notice 3 different patterns around them at their house or on their way home or anywhere after school and before coming to school the next day, and write them down, and then we could go over them as a class together the next day so we could see how many patterns are really out there every day. I think it's important to relate school to other things outside the class, so that way we can learn even more. So that's my lesson on patterns and sequences this week, and thank you for watching, and I hope everything went good, and thank you for helping.